Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformational Blueprints, where we try to put a dent in the large number of transformation programs that fail. Hosted by me, Mario Michaels, founder and director of Synaxia Group. On this series, we will bring you unique insights drawn from first-hand experience from some of the most high-profile architecture and transformation leaders across the globe. Topics told in order to share knowledge, experiences and ideas to inspire, innovate and give back to the architecture community. So grab a coffee, sit back and relax. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking to Baz Singh about the role of architecture in the future. Baz is currently the chief architect at Specsavers, and with a career spanning over 2 decades, he's garnered extensive experience in the retail and healthcare industries. Prior to joining Specsavers, he spent 16 years at Walgreens Boots Alliance, where he progressed through various roles to ultimately serve as the chief architect of the international division. He's deeply passionate about fostering a culture of continuous learning and collaboration, firmly believes in the power of leveraging collective experiences to drive innovation and deliver value-led outcomes, whether it's leading cross-functional teams, architecting robust solutions, or mentoring aspiring professionals. He thrives on inspiring confidence and fostering creativity at every turn. Baz, welcome to Transformational Blueprints.
Hi, Mario. Thank you for that very impressive intro.
Thank you very much. So, always a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to where you are. I know I briefly touched on it, but I suppose a bit more meat on the bones.
I guess let's start with family first.
Yeah.
Most important thing. So, married to Harpreet and have one very cheeky 11-year-old boy. My background is I'm originally from Africa. Spent quite a time growing up in the US, moved to the UK, spent a lot of time at university for various reasons, including education.
Yeah.
And then joined an organization called Unicam, which after 16 years evolved into becoming Walgreens Boots Alliance. And after 16 years, a change was necessary. I've always been passionate about retail and healthcare. And when Specsavers came calling, it was an opportunity that I just couldn't say no to. It's been a very exciting journey so far. We've got a lot of exciting things happening in Specsavers. It's a great time to be part of Specsavers. And if you're looking for a role, it's a very great organization to be part of in your future roles.
Nice little plug. I love it. I love it. Yeah, why not? Get that in. Very good. So obviously chief architect at Specsavers, in your opinion, and you've always been sort of an architect in terms of once your career matured, you know, enterprise at Walgreens and or risen through the ranks. But in your opinion, what attributes distinguish a great architect in today's, you know, rapidly evolving technological landscape?
What attributes of a really good architect? I guess from my perspective, there are probably 2 or 3 key anchor points for someone to be successful in architecture and somebody to become more passionate about architecture is being business focused, business outcome led, right? From my perspective, you know, we'll eventually get onto it, but from my perspective, architecture is all about answering 2 very important questions. One, which is, what are we doing well and we can do better? And what are we not doing so well at that we need to do differently or do different things altogether, right? And the way I see architects playing in that space is having really good understanding of your business, your organization, building the right relationships within your organization to allow you to be a bit more business focused, business led. And you should also be the technology leader in the organization, whichever way you're organized within your organization from an architecture function perspective, right?
Okay.
Functionally. So that the combination of those 2 attributes, from my perspective, embeds you as a leader within the organization rather than a leader within a function or a part of the organization. And that's why I'd see architecture, especially enterprise architecture, being critical in that space, that you get to play a slightly bigger role in the organization if you're able to bridge, if you're able to, and there's a lot of dynamics that need to be true to allow you to achieve that, to bridge into being a lot more business led and become the technology leader within the organization. Yeah.
Do you think that those, key elements or anchor points, as you put them, do you think they've evolved over time?
Definitely they've evolved over time. I think key factors kind of contributing that by the time we finish this call, Mario, tech would have evolved rapidly again, right?
Yeah, good point.
And will look even more different after noon this morning, afternoon, right? So I think technology in itself is evolving really rapidly.
Yeah.
I think the other factor is the role technology is playing is very different to what it was perhaps a couple of decades ago, right?
Yeah.
Technology is a lot more about leading and enabling and shaping business outcomes than supporting your organization as it was perhaps a little while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the challenge any technology department has, I suppose, because it's well documented that most transformation initiatives, specifically digital ones, fail. I think the percentage is around 82 or 84%. I think a key element of that is because technology is constantly evolving. So it takes time to initiate the program and to execute it. But in that time, as you said, by the time we finish this call, technology would have evolved in one way, shape, or other. So over a period of 2 to 3 years, by the time you've implemented what you set out to implement, you're already behind. So how do you, as a chief architect for a significant brand and a significant business, how do you overcome that?
That's a multifaceted question, right?
Probably don't have enough time to cover it.
I can't remember the analogy, Mario, but there's something I read quite some time ago, which I believe quite strongly about, is don't change your destination. You might need to change your journey, something of those lines, right?
Yeah.
And the destination is more around the outcomes you're trying to achieve, the why. Right? The why should be consistent, whether it's now or 4 or 5 years from now, right? Yep. The what and the how could potentially evolve because of tech, because of environmental, economical challenges, what have you may, right?
Yeah.
But your why should be really robust, right? If your very interesting question around why some of these things fail is, my humble opinion is, we sometimes are not clear about the why.
Yep.
And we try to evolve the why through the how. And although technology can enable that, sometimes those two things don't marry up. Yeah. And often we find, therefore, what we are delivering isn't quite what we needed, or we're delivering a lot more than what we needed, but the cost of running that is probably not something that's palatable. Yeah.
Yeah. So what can organizations do to increase the success rate of their transformation efforts then, other than let's work with the why in mind and work backwards?
Commit to having an enterprise architecture function.
Yes, I'm with you on that one.
What I would say.
Yeah.
But also use the enterprise architecture function as it's intended, right? So the why for me is a little bit embedded within the business architecture element of architecture, right?
Yep.
How do we get clear about what we're shooting for? And what you're shooting for will have different lenses: your customer lens, your internal dynamic lens, the industry lens, etc. So I think one important, from my personal experience, where I've seen this internally within my personal experiences or learning from others, where I've seen this be real successful, is when you have a business architecture focus and you have a commitment behind shaping and sustaining the why.
Yep.
Right. Things do get difficult during the journey, right? 3 years is a very long time in the modern days, right? It's a very long time. So how do we stay anchored to the things that we're trying to achieve, and that achievement is well beyond what a technology change should take ownership of? Yeah.
Okay. And another key element of it is around talent and harnessing talent effectively. And we've spoken many times about how you believe, without blowing your own trumpet, you believe you're good at that. Forever evolving, of course. But how do you first identify, and then secondly, develop the right talent within your team to support specifically architectural initiatives?
I think it's going back to those two questions, Mario. The value that an architecture function, again, my humble opinion, should output is clear understanding of what we're doing well, continue doing that, build upon that, refine it, do what you need to unlock more value from what we're doing well. And the second bit is identify where we need to do either different things or do things differently, right? To unlock value and outcome that perhaps may not be always clear or aligned within the organization, right? So for me, the development piece in architecture, whether you talk about it from business architecture, solution architecture, tech architecture, EA, etc., it's not a role thing. It's about a mindset thing. It's can we, as a collective group, build a mindset to be able to face into those questions in a way that we can engage the wider organization, which will be challenging, right? And therefore, in that mindset is an element of your resiliency, your style of leadership, your experience, expertise. At the end of the day, from an architecture perspective, people look to you to answer some specific questions related to tech. But as we said earlier, tech, the shape and role of tech has changed quite considerably. And therefore, how do you tell that story about the opportunities and the value we can unlock by thinking about tech differently, right? And it's how we tell that story, how we land that story, how we show the reality of outcomes by following that chain of thought is the development that we have to continuously pursue. I'm not sure me, myself, personally, have nailed it. I'm shocked if somebody said that to me, right? So it's a continuous development piece, but I think it's the most powerful element of architecture.
Yeah, and it's funny that, it was an interesting answer, and this is one of my bugbears as a sort of recruiter, is every single chief architect I speak to highlights how important it is to get business buy-in, to influence people, to be able to problem solve, to be able to look at something and say, right, there's the problem, or there's the outcome, how do we get there? These are all really, really soft skills, yet the amount of people that I put into businesses and go through an interview process, and it's all around the technology. What have you done with this? How did you achieve that? And nothing was, not nothing, but 70% of the interviews are technological led or technology and experience led rather than soft skills. So yeah, as I said, digressing a little bit, it's a massive bugbear of mine, because you've got all these chief architects in heads of that think or believe that it's a soft skill role, but yet when you get to CIO or CTO interview, it's always technology. But anyway,
I don't think you can decouple the two, right? If you've developed into being a really strong architect, you will find a way of balancing that conversation depending on the meeting you're in, the environment you're in, the organization you are in, right? So I think that's why I emphasize those two questions, because that helps us really start to think about how we want to approach things, right? And I think part of this is just being brave, saying we can be successful if this is true. We can't be successful if that is not true, right? And some of that is, most of that has got nothing to do with tech, right? The
exactly.
tech itself, right? The tech itself. It's more to do with thinking, mindset, approach, ways of working, culture, right?
Okay. So something you're quite passionate about, again, that we've spoken about quite a lot in the past, is the role of architecture going forward and in the future. So looking ahead, what do you envision as the evolving role of architecture within organizations? And I suppose leading into that, how can architects now start learning and adapt to meet the changing needs of the future of the architect?
I think it's a little bit of the same. I think, Mario, this is where tagging my friends from the Chief Architect Forum, the CAF Forum, where we somewhat debate things like this, right? How do we unlock sustainable value from architecture? Right. And again, the Baz Singh view is what I just said earlier, which is just how do we face into those two questions in a way that is really strong in the way we tell the story, and it's really anchored to a set of outcomes. We are all super busy. We always have to ask ourselves if we are busy doing the right things.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And therefore, how do we those two anchors that I have, not necessarily the right anchors for every organization, but you might have different anchors. How do you use those anchors to focus the development of your people, focus the impact of your role or your function's role within the organization? I really think having really solid anchors are critical as not just a function, but as technology evolves, it requires us to be more and more clear about what we're trying to achieve, right?
Yep. Okay.
There's more tech than there ever was before, and there's sometimes very little differentiation between them, right? Internally, there's a very bad analogy that I'm using, which is, if you wanted to make a laptop fly, we can probably put a really strong engineering team on it and they'll make it fly.
Yeah.
Question should be, why did we have a laptop in the first place? Right? Yeah.
I like
Who
that.
was using it?
Yeah. I'm going to use that one actually. So those two anchors and those two questions that you ask of your team are brilliant. And I suppose when you're trying to get buy-in from people that don't necessarily understand what an enterprise architecture function can bring and the value it brings, you probably have to put some tangible ROI onto it, especially if they're non-technical people. Have you got any sort of strategies around how you've done that or how you can do that? Are there, enterprise architecture is really hard to put, we did this and this was the outcome, because you're doing the scoping and the how rather than the what, or the why, sorry, rather than the how and the what.
Yeah, and it's not just about the enterprise architecture, right? It's our solution architect, technical architects that just as critical as enterprise architects, right? So the value chain is pretty long through architecture if we start stitching it all together. So if our solutions are really robust, they're working well as expected, little or no issues, that you're not going to necessarily get applauded for that, but that's something to be proud of. Somebody's designed something that works really well, right? And there's no ROI associated to that, but there is. You can if you put your mind to it. But there is. It's doing what the organization needs it to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's that element to it. I guess if we look at the enterprise architecture bit, I'm sorry, I'm a broken drum. The value of it is unlocked through those two questions, right? So lots of transformational work I've done in the past, lots of transformational work that's in flight right now, and we're trying to approach it in such a way that tells that story, and that's how we will help, hopefully, people see the value we bring to the table.
Yeah.
But architecture in itself is quite a diverse thing, right? It's funny because I've always wondered where architecture starts and stops.
Yeah.
And I myself haven't
figured that out.
I've gone into thinking about it now.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the results count, right? That's what every organization is about. The results are showing results out of any investment, and architecture is a significant investment in any organization, right? So if that's the example of the solution architects I used, right? How do we, for global organizations, how do we deliver pace and efficiency through reuse? Right. So we're not reinventing the wheel every time. That's a clear value unlock, right? That's not a case of doing it today or doing it in the future. That's just what architecture does and should do better and better and better. So as you go forward, right? The other element around the future bit is we've got to understand. I feel like architecture has a critical role in shaping the role of technology itself, right? And we can do that by influencing through innovation, through understanding of how we can do things differently to achieve the same outcomes, or doing different things altogether to delivering new outcomes, right? And I feel, it's a Baz view again, that the role of the future architects is kind of getting into that kind of space. We work very closely with a friend and a peer in the architecture community, somebody of the name Wendy Clune. She's a business architecture leader on the planet. She's doing a great job around emphasizing the desperate need around why organizations should think about from strategy to execution, and how business architecture plays a critical role there. So I think in the future, when I think about the role of the different roles of architectures, whether it's technical, solution, enterprise, there needs to be a very strong element of business architecture embedded within each one of those roles, right?
100%. Yeah, and it's often sort of said that architects can become disconnected from the business, and the term was coined ivory tower architects, and I suppose not falling into that trap. And I think personally, it's balancing that technical expertise with the business acumen and that commercial understanding of why it's really, really important. And actually, I've seen, had two guests on the podcast who architecture sits separately from technology. The chief architect reports, one of them reports into a COO, and the other one reports into a CFO, to really understand business strategy rather than just technology and being led by a CIO. So that was all really, really interesting. And I suppose from that, you're able to achieve a greater alignment between the business objectives and the IT initiatives, which is absolutely critical. What strategies do you employ to ensure that those decisions are synced with the broader business strategy? Can you share any sort of best practices that you do?
I think it all comes down to ways of working, right? It's a softer bit of it. I've been lucky in past organizations, and we are evolving that in Specsavers, how we work across the wider organization to be focused about value across functions and dropping labels around business and tech, right? So generally, I think, Mario, it's all to do with how we work together. Like I said earlier, they're some of the most effective organizations from an architecture perspective, I guess, is where I am seeing at least, where architecture is sitting more and more traditionally called in the business, right? And not in, as traditionally called, in technology. Right? And that's because the role of tech is very different to what it was before, right? And also because there's a lot of acknowledgement happening in many organizations. The ones kind of on the bleeding edge of ways of working is we've got to bring the thinking element of shaping the why and the what, very clear why and what, as close as possible between business and technology. And the groups that typically do that really well are architects, right? And strategists, right? So I see that trend more and more so, more and more so these days, but also seeing it fail miserably in certain organizations, right? And succeeding in many others. So I generally think organizations are trying to think about how they're going to work going forward. And therefore, they're really putting some emphasis behind that approach. Certain elements of organizations, whether it's a culture thing or other elements, kind of have a dynamic that has an influence on how well you can do that. But I generally think there is a bit of a movement. It feels like there's a bit of a movement.
You mentioned the ways of working and dropping the business and IT sort of terms and working across various, what do you call them, work streams, did you say?
Well, whatever you like, right? I think that's the challenge, Mario. I think the first thing we have to do is drop the labels.
Drop the labels. So how does it work then? Because that's really interesting. I've not seen or heard of that.
If there was an easy how, I think we'd all be on it, right? It's really just having the right focus, the right people, the right environment that allows the right focus, the right people to come together and work that opportunity or problem statement through, right? So we've done a little bit of that recently in Specsavers through an initiative where we are talking about some transformative actions going forward off the back of that approach.
Good.
And we can do so much more there, right? We kind of stepping into that approach, and we're going to make a lot of mistakes en route to that? Of course we will,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the how, I don't feel like there's a template
Right.
that says how you do it. You just have to find the right, you have to take ownership of building the right environment
Yeah.
to unlock that potential. Yeah.
Fine.
And that's
Okay.
very, very hard.
Yeah. Well, if only there was a book for it. So
But that
reflecting
said,
on your,
that said, you have to look at, there's, I'm not sure we can name organizations, but there are organizations who are doing this. Organizations I've been part in shaping and helping them doing that are genuinely making a massive difference to the organization and to the industry because they have adopted that way of thinking and that way of working. So it can be done. I guess if somebody's listening to this podcast, it is hard, but it can be done, and it is being done.
Yeah, very good. So moving over to your sort of architecture leadership career, then what experiences have shaped your approach to leading architectural initiatives, and any key insights or lessons from your journey that, if there's an aspiring solution architect or enterprise or technical architect that wants to be a chief architect in the future, what advice would you give them?
There's a couple of questions there, so just make sure I
Yes,
get the
quite a
first
few.
one right. So the first one is, one more time, Mario, sorry.
Yeah, sure. So what experience has shaped your approach in leading architectural initiatives?
Right. I was very fortunate for my first ever professional role, to be inside data, right?
Yeah.
A data function, and had an incredible leader, I think I could call names, and who really kind of helped build the emphasis of why being close to the business was really important, right?
Yep. Okay.
This is sadly going back nearly 20 years now, right?
Yeah.
And being business focused and being really close to the data that helps you understand your business even more so from a fact perspective.
Yep.
Felt like set me up in terms of the way I think.
Right? Good. Yeah.
So one of the things, we haven't yet done this in Specsavers. One of the things that is a model that I'm really passionate about is my function, or the architecture function, as you get to know the business from every angle or lens that traditionally people have. We also need to spend time learning about the hard facts through the hard data, because that brings to life some elements.
Yeah.
And helps us to confirm those two questions, the answers to those two questions we posed earlier. What do we do really well? Where can we improve? And where we need to do things differently, or do different things, right? So from my personal experience, if that's the question, that's what shaped me.
Yep.
I would encourage any budding architect, current or future, to really do whatever is possible to get close to the business dynamics, and learn it more so through data.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because then you've got here's the facts, here are the numbers. Let's put a bit of logic behind why those numbers are saying what they are. 'Cause, you can't just look at data and go, right, that's the story. There's always a story behind it by asking the right questions, I suppose. Okay, so as a leader, how do you empower your team, empower being the key word, to perform at their best? Like, are there any sort of things that you do that you think, oh, actually, I learned this from here and it's worked really, really well for us?
You as always, you bring in the best people you can, right?
Yeah.
You bring in the best people you want, best people you need, and
Yeah.
of course, leverage the best people we already have, right?
Yeah.
And you have to let them take ownership of shaping much, if not most, things, right? I guess my role is a little bit about, recently it's a bit more prescriptive than I would like it to be for different reasons, enabling the great people that we have, the good people, the great people we bring in. We bring them in, or we have great people already, because they're great at doing something.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Let them get on with it. Is I think as simple as I can be, right? If they need help, you help. Otherwise, I'm not going to know a tenth of what that person knows.
Yeah.
Right. And nor do I want to try.
Yeah.
So I think the empowerment is really create the environment where they can be successful. right? You've got to obviously help push and prod to challenge them from a development perspective, but also what you as a leader might need from them or the organization needs from them, right? That's what I would say.
Pretty much it. Yeah, bring them in, hire smart people, bring them in, get out of their way, basically. Okay, cool. We're going to move over to our quick fire questions then, and we've covered some of this off already, but I suppose first one, from a technology perspective, what do you think is going to be a game changer in 2024? You're not allowed to say Gen AI. I'm joking.
Where do you stop, right? It a little bit depends on the industry. So I'm not going to answer I'm not going to answer a industry specific thing. So if I look at it across the board, I think everything we're doing in data, without saying AI and ML and all that kind of stuff, right? How data will enable us to, how data will enable you and I as a customer to get closer to the services and the products that we want to interact, buy, purchase, right? How it will help us make that life simpler. And it depends on the community you're talking to. Some people are going to be really tech savvy who are really open to that, and some who don't want to adopt those services just yet, right? And I guess from a organization context, how do you leverage data to then create really powerful services, products for the customer, right? And I think, and I'm calling out data because more and more so, technology is bridging lifestyle choices to organizational outcomes, right?
Agreed.
And how do we bring them closer together, right?
Yeah.
For example, Specsavers, we are specialists and really successful in optics.
Yeah.
And we have a retail channel through which we execute that. A lot of our customers also buy fashion online, also buy, I don't know, electronic goods online, make healthcare choices exclusively online. They shop for their groceries online and so on and so on, right? But they do a lot of stuff through their feet as well, right? They go to the IKEAs of this world more and more so, apparently, right? They choose not to shop with IKEA online. They choose to go apparently in store, is what you read online. People from IKEA are going to tell me that's wrong, but that's okay.
That's because of the meatballs, though. That's at the end where you get to go to the cafe and have meat.
So the whole understanding of how our customer and colleague wants to think and operate and bring lifestyle choices closer to what an organization is all about. I think that's going to be how technology is going to become the critical, even more so a critical glue. Right. And data underpins all of that, right? The other element, I think, there's a lot of piece happening around RPA, robotics, process automation, all of that good stuff around how can we unlock efficiency, right? It was interesting. I was speaking to a CAF member the other day, and they said that a lot of the answers that they give to their business around some problem statement is actually it's cheaper, faster, quicker just to bring a human to do it. Really interesting, right? And at a point in time, we'll say, that might be true, but we can probably do more things from RPA perspective to look at solving for efficiency, solving for more and more complex use cases than perhaps what we're doing today, right? Which means we can get away from more and more monolithic solutions or more and more traditional best of breed solutions. You kind of stitch things together in a more efficient way. Right? I'm also a big believer in Mac architecture, and I can there's a lot of interesting movement in the industry in the Mac space right now, both from a consolidation and specializations. So I can see a lot of new value unlock coming for certain industries specifically through where Mac is evolving towards. I would say those are probably the top three things that come to mind.
I'm sure there's loads.
We could dedicate a podcast to that.
100%. What advice would you give to a newly appointed chief architect? Day one.
Day one. Don't be shy for asking for extra time to learn about your business. Get to learn it inside out before you do anything.
Before you make any decision. Makes sense. And you gave a great example of where early on in your career really worked for you in terms of getting getting that data experience and understanding, being close to the business from a data perspective. Is there any advice you wish you received earlier on that you maybe hadn't?
Any advice that I could have received earlier that I haven't? I've been incredibly fortunate to have some incredible leaders, right, to shape my career, shape my development. I guess from a personal perspective, I'm very results oriented, so a little bit more patience.
Yeah.
From my personal perspective, right, a little bit around, if you're going to learn the organization, give yourself time to understand the organization.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If you're going to learn your function, give yourself time to therefore understand your people better, right?
Yeah.
And I learned that through, the 14, 15 years I was at WBA. So it wasn't necessarily an advice, but it was definitely something I observed in my great leaders that I wish I had adopted 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. Fine.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So hardest interview question you've ever had?
Hardest interview question I've ever had. I've not thought about that. I don't know.
Or maybe that you ask.
Well, I love to ask one critical question when I'm bringing somebody into the organization, which is if they had a magic wand and they could bring with them to the new organization 3 or 4 things from the old organization, from the organization they're leaving, what would that be?
Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
And
why?
And why?
Yeah. Okay. And what's, from a talent perspective, specifically within architecture, what's the biggest change you expect to see over the next 5 years?
I think it's already happening. Lots of organizations are investing in building IT academies, right?
Yeah.
For many different reasons, predominantly around organizations most organizations are either already adopted or are waking up to technology and data underpins everything we do.
Yep.
Right. And we need to have a really strong, sustainable talent pipeline to be able to leverage, shape that capability, right, internally. Getting that capability externally has been a model that organizations continue using. I see a lot of organizations I speak with, a lot of them are committing to building talent organizations through talent pipelines through IT academies internally.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's something I spoke about at the Women in Architecture Forum around creating that base layer of architects before going and becoming a specialist. So rather than a T-shape, having like an I-shape architect, basically. Really interested. And we actually interviewed someone on here on the podcast that did that with EE and worked really, really well. He's now working for Jet2 as a digital solution architect, and brilliant. He was an ex-recruiter as well. So, look, sadly, Baz, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us and creating an excellent podcast episode. It's been really, really interesting and great to chat with you about how you see architecture will be in the future. So thanks once again for giving us your time and for contributing to a great podcast episode.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap. Sadly, we're at the end of another Transformational Blueprints episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and there were plenty of golden nuggets for you to take away. If you're a fan of the show, please do remember to share, like, and leave reviews so that more people from our industry get to hear and benefit from these too. Please also follow Synactia Group on LinkedIn to keep up to date with new episodes. Links in the show notes. Join us next time for another episode packed with tips and advice from senior leaders in the technology world.